wabarakatuh. I'm Sneha Pulapaka. Thank you everyone for joining me today. And thank you, Sienna, for a lovely introduction. Before I begin, I would like to, thank you. I would like to actually begin with a question to this room. I'm sure there's a lot of product people here in the audience. And I want to start with a simple question. And I want you to sit with it for a moment. When was the last time you saw a data product or dashboard or a KPI or a number on a slide and really thought, can I trust this? Do I know where the owner is, who the owner is? Do I know when it was last refreshed? Do I know when it was double checked? So if you've hesitated even for a moment, let me assure you, you are not alone. And this is what we are here going to talk about. And I would like to call this as invisible design. So my name again is Sneha Pulapaka, and I've been working as an insights analyst and product owner. And I've spent 16 years across industries like pharma, clinical trial consulting, government, public health, and wellness. In every sector that I've worked in, or every organization that I have worked with, I have sort of seen a similar pattern. They have got exceptional data or infrastructure, IT infrastructure. They've got the best tools that they can use for data governance. But quietly, there are spaces where people won't trust the numbers or the data, or who is, building the spreadsheets, or do we need to call someone to check on the numbers? So that is something, if something is not right, they don't know whether we can still trust the system. And today I just want to talk about what is that missing bit. So I would like to call it invisible design, like I said. And I want to leave you with 3 things. Make it visible. Create space, a safe space for people to ask questions. And the most important bit is mapping the journey, not just from iteration to the end, but actually asking whether the user at the end is really going to trust that data. How many of you, have been to Japan? Anyone who's traveled to Japan? Oh my God, awesome. I love that country. I've been there in 2024. I went on a solo trip. It was my first solo trip to another country. I love the system, the train system. And what I really find it interesting about the system is that it's always on time. You've no way a typhoon can even stop the train. Everything is very streamlined. And that's the beauty of the system, because once you start having notifications and if there's a delay or something, people are informed, so then it becomes easier to trust. So that's the trust we are trying to talk about. And imagine that same system that you would want to create for your data product, for example, and how you would think about where the data comes from. Does it really tell me the story? Well, that's the analytical part of it, but do I even trust the number in the beginning? Is there a decision that I can make on the number? Or does it just, arrive like the train does in Japan, for example? So this is what we're going to talk about, how we're going to design this for regulated industries. And so I also want to borrow from our keynote speaker today morning, Nuri Ape, where she mentioned and emphasized that for innovation, it's really important to kind of look at how it's not just the tool or the system that you're building, but it's actually the human behind it and how important it is. So if you are a product owner, a data analyst, business analyst or a stakeholder or even a developer, you might understand that how this, when you are looking at every time a dashboard, or if there's a, when was the last time it was refreshed, for example, to not a bad decision, okay, I know there's one missing feature, but can I trust it, kind of questions. I want to specifically now talk about regulated industries that I've worked with, okay. And what do we know about these industries? They are definitely heavy policy driven. They've got large volumes of data to deal with, right? And obviously, over time, we do notice that these organizations or industries in these would kind of acquire technical debt. And that's something we cannot, unsee. And yes, these organizations or industries take governance really seriously. They do define roles. You've got, your escalation pathways in place. You run compliance or, checks and audits and everything else. We tick all the boxes, but still there are, situations where, like data meetings, where you would end up with the question, do we really know where the number is coming from? Or, just 30 seconds after someone has shared, there's another person says, oh, I think that's wrong, and I have another number. So you can kind of see that, it might be like a post-it note situation, because we need to confirm who has actually, who's the data owner, or who's actually defined that KPI, who owns, who's the steward, or, who's even allowed the other person who may not have authority to look at that dashboard. So that's a custodian issue, or, so a lot of things can happen. Regulated industries are the best place to actually, kind of, I wouldn't use the word playground, but it's definitely a best way to check or understand invisible design. Now, I'm sure if some of you might feel such scenario might feel familiar. If you just, I'll give you a moment to just go through. So if we just add the three layers that I was talking earlier, in this scenario, the advisor is requesting for information, of course, but this still shows or signals that they don't trust the data, because one is that the advisor might have not been familiar with how the data people work or the data team works. It also could be that the advisor role, the person in the advisor role, their work scope is not, kind of put across to the other teams as well. So it could be a gap. And the signals in here are missed. So it's a signal issue. It's not a data issue. So it's about how we are capturing those signals at different intersections. So moving on. I'm sure everyone has a traditional, kind of dashboard KPIs, which shows what different KPIs look like. And yes, but does it rely on memory, or does it rely on a system of trust? That is what we're trying to look at. So, if the person in the earlier scenarios, if they felt like they might have informed the system about, oh, I'm going on annual leave, and would that really suffice? No, probably it would need more of that. It would need more a design lens. So if I come back to my points about making trust visible. Trust could have been made visible in all these scenarios through not only visual cues, but also making sure that people have the same, on the same page about how they go about the end user using the dashboard and acting on it. So if we want to reflect, these are the 5 things I actually look at when I help teams across, whether it is permit systems, because I work in mining and petroleum, and during audits of permitting systems, where the permits are kind of approved on a certain regulatory policy. So there are a couple of things that we keep in mind within large organizations. So I would say yes. Is there awareness in the situations that we just discussed earlier? Was there enough resources? Yes, there was enough resources, but people still use data in spreadsheets. So there is the same data being circulated in 2 different forms. And then is there ownership? Yes, there was ownership, but people didn't know how to reach out to the person because the person wasn't available, or it was just a sticky note. Was there business alignment? Definitely not, because the end user doesn't trust the data enough, so they won't know if they have to, kind of go ahead and say, yes, this is safe to use. And if it was publicly released information, then it would be really a big issue, right? So were there any pathways? They didn't know how to go back and check, so that's another issue. Feedback. I think this is the main important part, because a lot of data governance tools that are implemented in organizations, yes, we've got everything. You may name few like, Informatica or Colibre and any other people might use, but does it still tell you whether you can trust the data enough is the real question. So what does it look like if we really invite, this invisible design lens? Yes, you would have the last refresh data, for example. You would also maybe include who owns the data, for example, and that has context to the data lineage. And it is part of the user-centric approach, because we've kept in mind who is the end user and how they're going to use it and how they're going to act on it. Because in regulated industries, a single number could mean that it could be like a funding might be disapproved, or it could be a patient's, if it's a drug, a pharmaceutical drug that's going to come out. If there's not proper labeling on it, then definitely that's going to create another issue. So what are the practices we could use? Very quick, very easy, simple practices. And I call it like a decide framework, because I feel it was easy for me to remember and help with my team as well. Obviously, I want you to focus on the green column, because that is what we are trying to reach or emphasize on. While having a clear shared meaning of the metrics, yes, that means I understand the number. Assigning a clear accountability or authority, I know who to go to. Create traceability, of course, make data logic transparent. And I see, how this was created. Invite questioning. Yes, that's very important. I think questioning might be taken don't take it in a negative way, but I think it's more about making create a free space for people to ask questions. It's okay if it doesn't look right, I know I can ask the question. Designing the pathways. We know there are escalation pathways, but do we know what happens next? Yes, I know what happens next. So that's assurance. And yes, embedding these feedback loops, I think that is definitely going to help create or improve the experience. So, yeah. this is again something that I want to share. Whatever journey you are in the step, and what do you ask for? Yeah. So, does the data exist? What decision does it support? Obviously, you need to define it first. Name the owner, steward, or whoever is the related dependency. That is a non-negotiable. Define any critical rules, and yes, you automate and document it, but it's also about building capability here. And where did this come from? Obviously, that breaks into, how do we map this? The journey I was talking to you about earlier. So key things are obviously make it visual, create a safe space for people to ask questions about how data governance is in their organization. And the last one would be actually making sure that you map the journey, not just when you release the product, but also make sure you gather the information after the product is, and make sure you have information about how they're using it, because there's a lot of part where you can lose about how it is being viewed or perceived, or whether it's being trusted, because that's what we're talking about, trust here. So I'm going to just leave you with this, that your governance framework, data governance framework in any organization you work with, it can be technically perfect, but your ownership, or if you have not create a safe space for asking those questions, and how you can map it, and how it is visually available for you, then it is definitely a design issue. It's not a data issue. So, yeah, I would like you to just think about it, maybe with the analogy of a pharma drug going into the market. You wouldn't say to a patient saying, hey, we just prepared this on the last Tuesday, and here you go, you can just have it, consume it now. It comes with a label. It comes with a patient insert. It comes with all those regulatory requirements. And so would you really put your name on a label like that? So that's the question I want to give you all back to think. And with that, thank you so much for being and being here and attentively listening to my talk. I'm Sneha Pulapaka. I also work in spaces which are intersection of systems thinking, data, and creativity. So without any further, I would like to leave. Thank you so much.